The flying type, one of the most versatile type since it's almost always paired up with a secondary typing that allows it to expand on its already existing properties. Alongside this, it's one of the fastest type as well, giving you a great chance to always make the first move. But does these factors benefit or negatively affect the type? So let's take a closer look at flying, the type, unrestricted by the numbers. Let's start by looking at the flying type properties to see the innate traits of the typing before it inevitably gets paired up with another type. Flying is super effective against 3 types and able to resist 3 types. These 3 being grass, bug, and fighting. And this causes flying to have a unique stat where the type it's super effective against is identical to the type it's able to resist. Despite seeming like a simple concept to complete, no other type has done this. Well, except normal, since it has 0 for both categories. Alongside this, it's immune to the effects of ground type attacks. On the negative side, it has 3 weaknesses and resisted by only 2 types. But when steel was introduced in the Johto region, it became the 3rd type that is able to resist flying type attacks. Overall, the flying type is fairly balanced and its ground immunity can be very useful to avoid heavy blow from the common earthquake. But let's see if flying type Pokemon has become stronger and more widely available over the years. Just know, the following calculation is only considering regular and regional forms, not alternatives or megas. The flying type had an amazing start in the Kanto region, with it releasing a total of 19 flying types. This is tied for the record of most amount of flying types released in a singular generation, and of these 19, there exists a legendary trio and a pseudo-legendary, which really elevates the typing at the time. And it wasn't just them either, with 6 out of the top 11 Pokemon in terms of base stat total from Kanto being affiliated with the flying type. This allows the flying type to have on average a base stat of 445 in Kanto, which was pretty good at the time. The next generation of Johto didn't disappoint either, as they also released the same amount of flying types at 19. But since the total amount of Pokemon released in Johto was lower than Kanto, it allowed Johto to hold the record for largest concentration of flying type Pokemon at 19%. And flying was also the most common type seen in the Johto region, beating the water type by just 1. And of these 19 Pokemon, we are introduced to not just 1, but 2 main legendaries, who wield a crazy base power total of 680. Unfortunately for the rest of the flying type, and just the overall region as well, it just wasn't that powerful, so the average base stat of flying type Pokemon was slightly lower at 422. We then get into the Hoenn region, which introduced 12 flying Pokemon, and for the 3rd time we see a main legendary, as well as another pseudo-legendary. These 2 help aid the flying type to have an average base stat total of 440 in Hoenn. We then head into Sinnoh, seeing an additional 14 flying type Pokemon, who, for the one and only time in its history, didn't release a flying type with a base stat value of 550 or higher. This causes the flying type to on average have a base stat value of 421, the lowest we've seen thus far. And with the lack of legendary-ish Pokemon, the flying types of the Sinnoh region had the lowest average base stat total when looking solely at final stage Pokemon, with an average base stat of 485. Next up is the Unova region, where we, for a 5th consecutive region, see a large number of flying type Pokemon with 18. However, this is the last time a double-digit amount of flying types were introduced. Of these 18, there is a legendary trio, and this strong fossil Pokemon, half of the time. These Pokemon help the flying type reach its highest average base stat yet at 446, just 1 point greater than Kanto. It would be much higher, but the Therian forms are not being counted, since they are deemed as being alternate forms. The next region of Kalos is quite special for the flying type however. This region only released 8 flying types, but one of them is the typing's 4th main legendary, which causes the flying type to on average have a base stat total of 440. But the interesting part is that if we only count for final stage Pokemon, then Kalos flying types have the highest average base stat across all regions at 525. This also marks the last time the flying type receives a main legendary, which causes the type to drop off, such as in the next generation of Alola. This region also released 8 flying types, but outside of Stella, they weren't that good, so they reached their lowest average base stat ever at 416. And it doesn't get much better in Galar either, as although some of the Pokemon they released are powerful, the problem with Galar is that they released the fewest amount of flying types in a singular generation, at only 5, and the average base stat of these Pokemon was 432. And then we head into the most recent generation of Paldea. This region released only 6 flying type Pokemon, and despite it being more than the 5 released in Galar, it had the lowest concentration of flying type Pokemon across all regions, with only 5% of Pokemon released in Paldea being affiliated with the flying type. However, the flying types in this region did not disappoint, as they had the highest average base stat out of all regions anyways at 457. It helps a lot that there was only one flying type that wasn't fully evolved. Anyways, with all the flying types added together, they end up with a base stat average of 435. With the remaining 4 regional flying Pokemon added to the count, this average increases to 440, which is tied for the 10th highest alongside Electric. When looking at just final stage Pokemon, it ranks in 14th with a value of 505. This isn't that good, but the reason it ranks low is because there are just a lot of birds being released that are straight useless. Meaning, it's very easy to tell which ones are good and which one stinks. And speaking about a lot, there is also a decline in number of flying type Pokemon over the years. This is possibly because they removed the need of using the Fly HM for transportation. And if you don't need a flying type Pokemon for travel anymore, the overall reasoning to compensate with a large pool of flying Pokemon is also removed. This makes the flying type seem as some sort of demand and supply chart. It gets quite noticeable when looking at the overall frequency of flying Pokemon, with 12.6% of all Pokemon being affiliated with the type back in Generation 1 to about 10.6% of all Pokemon being flying types now. When counting the 4 regional forms, 113 out of 1080 or 10.5% of all regular and regional form Pokemon are associated with the flying type. It's still a large amount, being one of 5 types to have over 100 Pokemon, but you have to wonder if this decline will continue due to the unnecessary need for the move Fly. So now let's look at the playstyle that the flying type involves itself in. For one, it's practically bound to be paired up with other types, which allows it to diversify its moveset and strategies, leaving very few ways to consistently counter the flying type in battle. This constant type matchup gives flying type a unique record, being the first type to be paired up with all types, completing it all within the first 6 generations. Water has also done it in 6 generations, but Hawlucha Pokédex entry beats out Volcanion's Pokédex entry. Outside of being unpredictable due to its typing, the type is also very fast, as they have on average the highest speed stat across all types according to Pokemon database. Its defensive stats on average are also pretty low. This means that typically, the flying type is reliable when getting to attack first. You also have to be wary of electric and dragon type Pokemon, as they are close to flying type in terms of average speed, one of which is super effective against flying and the other has high stats that could pierce through flying's defense. But now let's look at moves. Are they giving great attacks to match up with this high speed? Let's first look at status moves. The flying type actually has 3 commonly seen status moves in competitive. The most known one is Roost. It's basically recover that can be learned by almost every bird Pokemon, which is great for survivability when you can outspeed. You just have to be aware that when using Roost, you become grounded for the turn and the opponent may deal more damage than you can restore due to the flying type's low average bulk. The other 2 flying status moves are Defog and Tailwind. Defog removes all entry hazards and terrain, allowing you to switch freely without worrying about crippling damage. And Tailwind, double speed for the entire team for the next 4 turns, which is undoubtedly good, unless you're running a Trick Room team. But overall, a move that increases speed and removes hazards can give your team a lot of freedom in battle. Now let's look at flying type damaging moves. For special attack, it's usually Hurricane or Air Slash. Hurricane has 110 base power with only 70% accuracy, but does have a 30% chance to inflict confusion. As for Air Slash, it has 75 base power with 95% accuracy, which is much greater, and has a 30% chance to flinch, which is great since the flying typing is typically faster than others. Of these 2, Hurricane gets chosen more often in competitive, simply because it has another effect of never missing during rain, and weather conditions play a huge role in competitive Pokemon than that of just casual play. As for physical attacks, the only viable attack is Brave Bird, a move with 120 base power, 100% accuracy, but does recoil damage, which can be restored with the previously mentioned Roost. All in all, the flying type has good supporting moves and a strong physical move. The special move can be somewhat uncertain with there being a chance to miss, but since these Pokemon are always dual type, it can always rely on the other stab options if needed. So now let's look at dual typing. We know for certain the flying type has it, but are they paired up with those that elevate them higher, or are they brought down to suffer? This part will be analyzed by comparing flying Pokemon to typing stated in Wolfie's video about all type combinations. In his video, the worst 3 typing flying could be matched up with are Bug, Ice, and Grass. You know, the usual suspects when it comes to being ass. These combinations were seen a total of 13 times across final stage flying Pokemon, which may seem like a lot, but really isn't, since there are 71 dual type final stage flying Pokemon, meaning that on average each type should have about 4.2 Pokemon if types were given even distributions. And the bottom 3 should collectively have 12.6, which rounds up to 13. Now of course, it needs to be noted that 9 of them are bug flying, the worst possible flying typing, with double the expected amount. Now, most of these Pokemon are basically just expired butt juice throwaway mons needed to fill the decks. Unfortunately for flying, it was tagged along. As for the best 3 combination, it was stated to be Flying Steel in 3rd, Flying Electric in 2nd, and Flying Ground as being the best. These 3 combinations are only seen a total of 9 times out of final stage flying Pokemon, meaning they are actually being underutilized. There actually should be more Steel Flying and Ground Flying Pokemon, so until then it has to rely more so on its attack and moves. Just imagine the day they release a main legendary with one of these typings. But how does this all integrate into flying type's performance in competitive Pokemon? Just know the following stats are from Peakalytics and was extracted on July 3rd, 2025. Pokemon usages could have increased or decreased from when you are viewing this video. Let's start as usual with the Uber tier. In this format, there exists 4 flying type Pokemon in the top 30 for usage rate. 2 of them are mainly for hazards. Ho-Oh is mainly for defensive purposes, and Rayquaza is used for sweeping, with Dragon Dance and Dragon Ascent. Outside of Rayquaza, none of these Pokemon really rely on its flying typing for damage, and its typing is mainly used to help them avoid the common Earthquake, a move that can be learned by all 4 of these Pokemons, by the way. This is seen in a higher lens when we look at the OU tier. Flying types are seen more frequently in this tier, with there being 4 of them in the top 15 for most used Pokemon. Now, listen to this. Of these 4 flying type Pokemon, none of them uses a flying type damaging move in their moveset. And yet, despite being immune to Earthquake, 3 of them do use Earthquake in their moveset as well. If you want to hear more about how dominant Earthquake is in competitive Pokemon, check out either my By the Number Ground or Electric video, and make sure to subscribe to help out the channel. Anyways, let's move on to the monotype format. This format requires you to build a team with Pokemon that shares a common type. Fortunately for flying, it is one of the most versatile type that can practically fight as if it's another type. This allows it to complete a roster of 6 in just 26 slots. This is the 3rd highest across all types, only behind Dragon, who is a stat merchant, and Steel, which is a defense merchant. All in all, this format shows that the flying type can adapt to any game mode without it being seen as one of the strongest type in general. But now, let's see its performance in doubles battles. In doubles OU, the flying type also places pretty well in this format, with it having 4 spots in the top 20 for usage rate, with only one of them even having a flying attack in its moveset. So why does it do good in both singles and doubles, despite not having a trait that sets the type above the rest? The reason is quite obvious. It's because its 3 weaknesses are all liabilities when it comes to competitive, allowing flying to roam freely in these formats. Ice and Rock has so many defensive flaws alongside being slow that makes them practically unusable in combat. As for electric types, there is nothing innately wrong with them, but with ground type attacks being so prevalent, they tend to not get used. In fact, of these 4 flying types, 2 of them are immune to electric entirely, and 1 receives neutral damage. This is why flying is able to see usages without even relying on its offense. But what if these weaknesses did exist? Let's look at the VGC set I stats. Surprisingly, the flying type only sees 1 appearance in the top 15 for usage rate. This is because, for the one and only time, the flying type is actually met with Pokemon that can efficiently counter them. For the electric types, it sees more usage in doubles since Earthquake is less desirable due to its effect of hitting allies. Also, in VGC set I, Miraidon becomes available, the most powerful electric type to exist. As for ice Pokemon, Calyrex Ice Rider, who was available in Ubers, becomes even more useful, as it can fully utilize its unique move Glacial Lance effect of hitting multiple targets, which really threatens the flying type, especially those that are normally dominant, which are dual ground flying type Pokemon. And even the rock type makes an appearance in the VGC thanks to Ogerpon Cornerstone, although this is mainly for defensive purposes, but still, it has a powerful rock attack in Ivy Cudgel that can also be devastating for the flying type. And with these counters actually being present for once, the flying type is unable to see a wide range of use. But what do you guys think? Is it being held back at times since it doesn't have the greatest moves and irrational dual typings, which only allows for a select few options? Or is it meant to always float in the back as a secondary type and be used in a plethora of ways that other types can't seem to replicate while avoiding the devastating Earthquake and remain the type unrestricted by the numbers?